Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. I can't think of a kind of a better segue into what we're talking about. I mean, Bob talked about net positive in his future fit business, and to me, that's really all about what restorative design is. At the risk of being too formal, I put together an agenda mostly for me, so I can keep on target. But I'll talk probably pretty fast just because there's a lot of content to get through. But in 15 minutes, I hope to give you an understanding of what the Living Building Challenge is, which is a restorative design standard, and how we applied that standard to a recent project that I was a part of through an integrated architecture. And then I hope to leave you with some value takeaways so that when you're talking about this and deliberating about is the Living Building Challenge, is restorative design appropriate, you'll have some tools hopefully to help you with that. So the Living Building Challenge, it's an aggressive standard. It's a restorative standard. It's kind of been dubbed the world's most sustainable living or building standard. And it's elegant in its simplicity. It's a complicated, nuanced system, but in its structure, it's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. It's got two primary rules, and the first is all imperatives are mandatory. So imperatives are the things that you have to do to demonstrate that you've achieved the Living Building standard. And there's 20 of them. They're organized into 7 categories or 7 petals. And then it's based off actual performance rather than anticipated performance or expected performance, which is fairly unique in the marketplace of sustainable building standards. As I said, there's 20 imperatives. I'm not going to go through them all because I only have 15 minutes. But like I said, on the left, you're going to see the petals. So you have place, you have water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. The latter two are my favorite. You don't get a whole lot of building standards that incorporate social elements of beauty and equity into their systems, and it was refreshing to find. This is the growth. So it was launched in 2006. You start to see some growth over the past 6 years. 5.5 million square feet. Sounds like a lot, but to put it in context, this global number, this global total is less than 1/10 of 1% of last year's new construction and renovation projects in the U.S. So it's the top of the market, and it's intentionally that way. And we'll get into that, but it's really trying to push the market forward into a restorative future. So that was a very quick summary of a very complicated system. I'll be around all afternoon, so if you have questions on it, feel free to ask me. You can get a lot of information on the web, but that's the sort of lens I want to start to frame this next approach, the Living Building Challenge that we did for the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College up in Mount Pleasant. The process we went through to get to this place is they approach integrated looking for a net positive energy building. They didn't have Living Building Challenge on their preview, so we were responding to that RFP, and when we were introduced with the client, we introduced them to the Living Building Challenge because we thought it was a good fit for them. They're deeply steeped in heritage and culture, and they're looking to serve the 7th generations, so that's 140 years into the future. So we thought, sure, great, a net positive restorative building would be a good approach for them. So we introduced them to the challenge. They loved it. So the first thing they asked us is, so how do we do that? How do we get there? Integrated is a wonderful design team, wonderful design firm, but we're going to be the first to admit that we don't know everything. And so we quickly had to realize where our gaps were and who we needed to bring on to kind of achieve this building standard. And so here's the team. It represents hydrologists. It represents material experts. It represents some of the best engineers in the country, kind of building an A-team around how do we do this. And to me, the future of the path towards restorative design starts with a collaborative team. And that's really kind of impactful and really kind of important. Worthy of note here is that part of the Living Building Challenge is you have to grow food. And designers like to talk about food. We like to eat food. And we like to eat and drink things that growing hops produces. But we don't always know how to grow that and produce that. So we actually invited a farmer to the table, and that was pretty significant for this team. And as I get into it, I hope to demonstrate why that's kind of what impact that had on the team or the project. So collaboration requires a lot of touch points. And so we try to build into the schedule a lot of times that the whole team from across the country could kind of be in the same room and talk about these 20 imperatives and how we're going to approach them. So this is just a quick, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but this is just what we developed right up off the bat. We established touch points that we're going to connect and talk about the imperatives. This is our first go at it. This was the kickoff meeting. It was in the Zivug Center, which is the Saginaw-Chippewa Tribal College's cultural museum. We got a history lesson on their tribe and what it means to be a Native American in the States and what it means to be living in Michigan. And this was about 30 design professionals coming together in the morning and about 20 project stakeholders from the tribal college, all talking about what it means to design for the 7th generation and what should our guiding principles be. And that was proved to be one of the most significant parts of the whole process. So right off the bat, we established guiding principles. And these guiding principles turned out to be more restrictive than the Living Building Challenge. So if you didn't think trying to design a building to the world's most sustainable building metric was hard enough, we added a whole different layer of complexity to it. And it was really done to streamline the decision-making process. So how can we kind of weed out all the decisions, all the ways, all the avenues, all the paths to get to net zero energy or net zero water? And we wanted to focus on what was important to the tribe. And the 7 grandfathers is important to the tribe. And that's how we kind of organized our process and how we made decisions. So if we're talking about materials in a Living Building Challenge, there's toxic chemicals in the materials we use to build buildings with, and you can't use them in living buildings. But how else, what other filters can we use to kind of find what materials we ought to use? And so when we're looking at being authentic to the tribe, and we'll get to a slide later, but it's really kind of looking at the tribe and their heritage and what buildings they used in the past to build buildings with, and what can we learn from that. So this is a typical design process. We develop site elements. We try to site it on the property or on the location that they have identified. We come up with options. We're looking at how water flows through the site. We're looking at how where the wind comes from. We're looking at shared resources. We've developed options. We're talking about the whole team. And one of the things we discovered in that initial kickoff meeting too was building by consensus is important. And if you're trying to navigate roughly 60 people, building consensus is a slow, really kind of painful process. But it was really important because it got buy-in from the whole tribe. And we were at this point when we were presenting these 3 where the project could have taken a very different turn. And instead of just kind of pushing through what we as architects thought was the best or appropriate solution given the information we had, we really invested in that consensus building process, and we wanted to be collaborative. We wanted to co-create this solution. So we presented 3 options for all these different site elements, and the tribal college just didn't like either of them. And it wasn't because we didn't hear them, it was because they didn't say what they really wanted to say. So we had to listen and push them. And the defining moment is they said, we're looking at this northern lot, and that's really not where we want the site. And there was a division within the tribe, but we ultimately landed on a site to the south that was nested in between 2 woods, and that was significant for them because they're woodland people. That's where they their heritage is. And so from that moment forward, we really had buy-in from the whole tribe, and it was really impressive. And from that moment, we really started looking at more specific details about Living Building Challenge, like how does water travel through the site climatic conditions, where does the sun go, where does the wind come from, things like that. We developed a program. What kind of spaces does the user need? We organized them in a building mass. We started doing energy modeling right off the beginning. So we had an engineer on staff and he was giving us feedback of all these different approaches to what's the best optimized massing, how many floors. So we're taking all this into account, and here's where the cultural heritage of the tribe became quite important. Being authentic means looking back at what they did and what the knowledge base that they have versus kind of us projecting what the new science tells us. So this is the wigwam. This is their historic residential style building. And we also heard quite clearly they didn't want a literal interpretation of this. We looked at this, we found, you know, what strategies are they employing in this that we can take forward? Adaptive skin that adapts to the climate that's built of native found elements. They employ natural ventilation. They use thermal storage devices to heat and cool and condition the space. So we took all of that and we applied that to a modern building. And here we're starting to mass the building up. We've taken the program, we're thinking about the wigwam and what it's trying to accomplish. We're doing daylight studies. This is all within a 6-month process with a team that's kind of across the country, communicating every week to build a truly restorative facility. And this is kind of where we landed as a solution. So this is about a 46-acre site. On the left, you'll see a 9-acre farm that we didn't initially know that was in the program until we started talking about what it means to pursue the Living Building Challenge. And that's a significant change in program. And that's why we hired a farmer to kind of come in and help us design this farm so it's not just some raised beds in the middle of the city or in the middle of a field, but it's actually productive, useful, valuable land. We naturalized the stream. We incorporated native species. This site is net positive water, so the site entering it leaves cleaner than it would have originally. We're producing more energy by 15% than what is required. We have an appropriate sized parking and wayfinding for all modes of transportation, not just vehicular. And this is the floor plan. And I'm not going to get too much into this just because time constraints, but this is just organized in the best possible way to optimize the use of the space, energy they require to achieve the Living Building Challenge. And here's some just images of the renderings that we did at the end of the schematic design process. This is the courtyard that was essential to our water system. Also, it helped the daylighting strategy of the facility. This is the approach. So when you walk in, the town hall is the heart of the facility, and that was intentional and kind of reflects the tribal kind of communal space as the hub of their activities. And this is the approach as you drive up the drive. This is what you would see. Material building that's really very much of the earth and hopefully reflected in our design approach. So the takeaways, the layers of value. When I started describing this to people, to potential additional clients about pursuing the Living Building Challenge, early on I said it's 1/10, right now 1/10 of 1% of last year's market share of all buildings. It's intentionally that way, and it's really, you have to align a lot of different layers of value to get to the right client, to the right project. And this one was just happened to be that perfect kind of storm. You know, you see lower operation maintenance costs, you see human productivity increases and stuff like that. And then the next slide, this is really kind of me trying to, a lot of information here, but make sense of all those different benefits. And the biggest thing to see here is on the top, we have a bar of more of typical higher ed or community college building life cycle costs. So you have first cost, you have operational costs, then you have human salaries. The people that occupy the space, their work, to kind of aggregated and divided up by their share of the total cost. And then you start getting to a living building energy facility, you're gonna spend more on first cost. Right now, I'm assuming double the first cost, even though that's not always true. But you're significantly reduction in the energy requirements because the first cost buys the energy needed to occupy the facility for the long haul. And then the human productivity slide is you see the green there, those are all like studies that have demonstrated human productivity increases in the occupants over the course of the year. And it's really trying to get at, the slide or the comparison in the middle there. The first cost is really dwarfed by those aggregated benefits. And that's going back to the layers of value there, the previous slide. So the last takeaway is you really need the right team too. It was imperative that we co-created this project together. It wasn't just integrated. It wasn't just the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College. It was all of us working together. And the path to a restorative future is this sort of design collaboration. And that's all I have for you this afternoon.